Hi, my name is Victoria White, and I have been growing Moringa oleifera out here in the desert outside of Tucson, Arizona, the Sonoran Desert, for about 4.5 years now. And it's been quite a learning experience. I will first tell you how I began to grow moringa. First off, my mother is Filipino, and moringa is a very common ethnic food among Filipinos. So she was born and raised in Hawaii, and my grandparents came over from the Philippines, and they always had in their backyard moringa trees. So she grew up eating moringa from as long as she can remember, and of course we would go visit my grandparents every summer in Hawaii, and I would get to eat moringa all growing up as well. So it was known to my mother and my grandparents just as a vegetable, and familiar with all of the scientific studies that have since been done on it. So anyway, I just knew it as a vegetable. So what happened is I used to always go out there and love to eat it, and my favorite thing to eat was these pods, which this is a dried up seed pod, but when this is green, it's a very good vegetable. It can be boiled, and then the inside of the flesh can be scooped out and eaten. It's kind of like a squash, or like what can I even compare it to? Like a summer squash, I guess, or an okra kind of, but it doesn't really have that okra texture to it. Very flavorful. So my relatives knew that I loved this, and even if it wasn't in season, they would make sure they had plenty of it in their freezer, so when I did come out and visit, I would get to have a lot. So I always loved it, and they knew I always loved it. So anyway, I was born and raised in Oregon, and moringa does not grow in Oregon, so it wasn't something I would have had in my own backyard. Now, what happened is I got reintroduced to it about 5 years ago. It has become popular as a health food, as a superfood, and has since had a lot of studies on it since the time I was growing up. And what happened was I was doing work for an internet television channel, and they sent me to go interview somebody who was growing this miracle tree, and he was using it to feed starving people in underdeveloped countries. So in order to prepare for the interview, of course, I needed to do some research so I could ask intelligent questions. Well, it turned out it was the moringa, and as soon as I saw the picture, doing the Wikipedia and all those searches online, I knew immediately it was what I loved and what I had called as moringai. Moringai is one of the 300 different names for moringa, I came to find out, depending on which country, which culture you live. And so I was astounded when I started reading more about it, how beneficial it is in so many different areas, and why it was called the miracle tree. So I went and I did the interview, and the guy that I interviewed actually gave me some seeds. These are the moringa seeds. And he gave me maybe, I don't know, 100 seeds or something. And I started growing them, and they germinated great. And then I wanted to look I was so intrigued about this plant that I started looking around the local area to see if there were any nurseries that carried it, or who knew about it, how to grow it, if there was anything I needed to do. And I came to realize that nobody knew anything about it. It wasn't in any of the nurseries. The only thing I did find was down at the University of Arizona in downtown Tucson, there was actually a mature moringa tree, which made me really excited because I knew at least if it's growing in Tucson, I should be able to grow it. So my journey about discovering how to grow it kind of blossomed from there, both from my own experience and also starting to do more research with people who are growing it in various areas. There wasn't a lot on it about growing it in the desert, so I really had to learn from experience what happens with the moringa. And one of the things I discovered is that it is very sensitive to freezes. And we can get down into the 20s, the teens, at times, not all the time, but it normally does freeze here where we live. And so what happens with our trees is they actually will die back in the wintertime and then come up from the roots the next year. So you don't have to plant another tree. You can have your same tree and just know that it's okay that it dies back, and then it will come out the next year. And so we've been doing this for over 4 years, and I've seen this cycle repeat itself again and again and again. So I'm pretty confident that we can grow it here. We're right on the edge of being able to grow it. The main thing is, as long as the ground doesn't freeze, the roots will survive and the tree will survive. So if you live in an area where it actually does freeze, the ground does freeze, then you know that your tree is pretty much not going to survive the winter time. There are people I've heard in northern climates where it does get so cold that happens, where they will just grow them as an annual. Because one of the amazing things about this tree is that it is one of the fastest growing plants on the planet. So our trees, from the spring when they start coming out again from the roots, the ones that we planted outside, to about the end of the season, which is around Thanksgiving when we start getting our first freeze, I'll be harvesting the leaves throughout the season, and then towards the end I'll just go and cut as much as I can, harvest it, dehydrate it, freeze it, make it into powder, do whatever with it, and the trees will be 15 plus feet tall. So I can tall trees in just that 1 6-month period. And one thing that I find is that the trees do tend to come out of dormancy when it starts getting warm. And what I have just observed is that when the nighttime temperatures here get above 70 degrees is where I start seeing these trees look like they're growing overnight, inches at a time each day. So that's one thing to consider, is that if you don't see the tree automatically starting to come up on the first day of spring, it could be because your temperatures aren't warm enough. I've seen them start coming out of dormancy in June, even as late as July, and they'll still get 15 feet tall by November. So not to get discouraged about growing moringa if you feel you're right on the edge of being able to grow it like we are here. So some of the other amazing things about moringa is it is filled with nutrients. It's amazed scientists because of not only the variety of nutrients in it, but also the concentrations of those. An example is it's been said to have 6 or 7 times the vitamin C ounce per ounce that oranges have, 4 times the calcium that milk has, 3 times the iron that spinach has, 3 times the beta carotene that carrots have, 3 times the potassium that bananas have. These are all things that we know of to be some of the highest concentrations of those vitamins, and minerals. This is even greater than those foods. And for instance, one of the things, it has a lot of minerals, like it has selenium, and in order to assimilate selenium, you also need vitamin E. Well, it has both, so it synergistically works very well with all the different things it has to help them to absorb better. It's got all the essential amino acids, and it has about 18 of 20 of the amino acids total. I think there's 9 essential amino acids, of which it has all of those. And it's full of antioxidants, and it's just an amazing plant. So and then it grows fast. The other thing is it can grow in harsh environments that a lot of other things can't grow in. We get very hot in Arizona during the summers. It can be over 110 degrees, and I've seen other plants in our garden really start wilting and suffering. And the moringa trees, they love full sun. They do really well out in that heat, and it's amazing to watch them just looking like they're not stressed or totally healthy in that kind of environment. So it's the 2 things that you really have to look for as far as moringa goes is the cold, and you want to make sure you have well-drained soil. We have a clay soil here, And I do, when I plant a moringa tree, I put in amendments to get it to make sure it drains well instead of being a big muddy mess. And that can cause root rot if you do allow standing water to kind of be around the roots for too long. It can handle water every day though. In Hawaii, I know that my experience was afternoon thunderstorms practically every day, or afternoon rainstorms. And the moringa trees did just fine there, but they have a sandy type of soil and well drained, and that is the main thing. I have noticed that the more you water the plants, the faster they tend to grow. They also do really well in areas where you're putting other vegetables and other plants around. They fix nitrogen in the soil and help to fertilize the other plants that are around there. I had watermelons growing around them a few years ago, and I had 40-pound watermelons. It was amazing. So they can handle being in drought conditions, but they really like the water. I have read on the internet that about 12 inches is all they require. I would tend to think they need more than that. It may also depend upon the climate. If you have a more humid, not as hot environment as we get here in the Sonoran Desert, you could maybe get away with that because you're not going to have evaporation happen so quickly, and you've got that humidity. But we just get so dry, and the sun can evaporate whatever water's being put in the ground very quickly. So I can even water every other day or every day, depending on what else is around the tree. Obviously, if it's in my vegetable garden, then they're getting watered every day, no matter what.